Good morning. It is Sunday, November 16th. I'm Velshi, live from MS Now's brand new studios in Times Square. We begin this hour with the unraveling of the president's relationship with some of his former top supporters as the Epstein files scandal closes in on him. Donald Trump has spent the weekend rage posting to his own social media site against Republicans who supported a successful measure to force the vote on a bill that would compel the Department of Justice to release all its information on Jeffrey Epstein. We have new reporting this morning. White House sources tell MS Now that the vote, which is now scheduled for Tuesday, is a, quote, losing battle for the president. But they also say there's no scenario in which Trump would order the release of the Epstein files. The Epstein Files Transparency Act is set for a vote this Tuesday after a petition to force a floor vote reached 218 signatures in the House, and it's all but certain to pass. In fact, GOP leadership is expecting defections in the dozens. Up to 100 or so Republicans could end up voting for this bill. Ro Khanna, one of the proponents of the push, was on Meet the Press this morning to outline the political problem that Trump faces.
Donald Trump started to tweet out saying that he's going to unendorse people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. So it's basically Massey and me versus the White House. I mean, they're calling members to the Situation Room. But you know why Trump is losing his MAGA base on this? The reason he's losing it is he ran saying there's a corrupt governing elite that has shafted you, that this is the Epstein class versus forgotten Americans, and I'm going to stand up for forgotten Americans. He's forgotten those forgotten Americans.
Now, if and when this bill to release the so-called Epstein files passes the House, it would be a normal bill. So it would then have to go to the Senate and pass there. And if it passes the Senate, it would have to be signed by the president. And while Trump would not likely sign such a bill, that's not really the point. The fact that he won't release the files is only fueling speculation about why, and further driving a wedge between Trump and crucial parts of his MAGA base who've long called for the release of the Epstein files. And even without the DOJ doing its part, the House Oversight Committee has used its subpoena power to unearth tens of thousands of documents from the Epstein estate itself. In 20,000 pages of documents released this week by the committee, Trump is mentioned by name hundreds of times. And Democrats on the committee have been very clear that they will continue their own investigation. The push and pull over the Epstein files may also be the GOP's biggest intra-party fight of this term so far. In fact, I think it's fair to say that it is. Marjorie Taylor Greene, once known around the Capitol for almost exclusively for her unqualified support of Donald Trump, has emerged as one of Trump's biggest Republican critics in this moment. The Epstein files scandal has been at the forefront of her split from Trump, but Greene has criticized the White House on multiple fronts. She's accused the administration of being too focused on international affairs instead of domestic policy. She's criticized the $40 billion bailout for Argentina's economy. And she said she was, quote, absolutely disgusted by the lack of a GOP plan to address the expiring Affordable Care Act.
Donald Trump has announced a new platform that shocked everyone.
For many years, I have been searching for opportunities that allow people not just to survive, but to thrive in today's economy. And today, I am ready to share with you one of the most promising areas I have created, which will help many people achieve financial freedom and confidence in the future. Follow again bit.com, enter the special word USA25 to claim your wonderful bonus of 1,500 USDT. Make America great again.
But on Friday, the president decided he'd had enough of her. He unendorsed Greene in her bid to keep her seat in 2026 and called her a wacky, ranting lunatic while encouraging a primary bid against her. Greene responded, I've supported President Trump with too much of my precious time, too much of my own money, and fought harder for him even when almost all other Republicans turned their back and denounced him. But I don't worship or serve Donald Trump. Saturday morning, the president rolled out two new nicknames for her, Marjorie Taylor Brown, because green grass turns brown when it begins to rot, and Marjorie Traitor Greene. But Greene made the stakes of the fuel real minutes later when she posted, I am now being contacted by private security firms with warnings for my safety as a hotbed of threats against me are being fueled and egged on by the most powerful man in the world, the man I supported and helped get elected. And this morning, Greene appeared on CNN.
What do you think happened? What do you think is the reason for this?
Unfortunately, it has all come down to the Epstein files, and that is shocking. And, you know, I stand with these women. I stand with rape victims. I stand with children who are in terrible sex abuse situations. And I stand with survivors of trafficking and those that are trapped in sex trafficking. And I will not apologize for that.
Green was one of 4 Republicans who signed the discharge petition to force a vote on the Epstein files, alongside Lauren Boebert of Colorado, Nancy Mace of South Carolina, and Thomas Massie of Kentucky, who co-sponsored the bill, pardon me, and led the effort alongside California Democrat Ro Khanna, whom you heard from moments ago. Congressman Boebert of Colorado was actually summoned to the Situation Room, which is not usually a conference room for casual meetings, to discuss her position with the Attorney General Pam Bondi and the FBI Director Kash Patel. She, however, did not change her position as a result of that meeting. Trump tried to call Nancy Mace herself, but the two were unable to connect. Mace has also kept her name on the discharge petition. And by the way, now that it's done, nobody can take their name off of it anyway. So the takeaway is that the Trump administration is willing to create the appearance of using political threats and the trappings of the presidency to pressure 3 women in Congress to back off of their calls for the government to release its criminal files on a notorious sex offender. And it did not work. Joining me now is Lisa Rubin, MS Now legal correspondent and the host of the podcast, Can They Do That? And Basil Smykel, MSNBC Now political analyst and professor of practice and director of the MS program in nonprofit management at Columbia University School of Professional Studies. Welcome, both of you. Thank you for being here. Lisa, so much to discuss about the legality of this, all of what's been going on. I'm going to get to that in a second. I want to start with Basil about the politics. Most of our viewers are not going to generally find themselves on Marjorie Taylor Greene's side on much, but it's been weird in the last 3 weeks, having her criticize Republican health care policy, having her criticize Donald Trump on his musings around the world, talking about Nigeria and Venezuela, and now this. This one's been going on for a while. Something's coming unraveled, and Donald Trump's behavior on social media seems to indicate that he's really rattled by this.
Well, it seems like we're on Earth, too, because of the Marjorie Taylor Greene comments. But, yes, that's where we are. When you listen, my Catholic school elementary teacher, one of them said, a guilty conscience needs no accuser. And I remember that very clearly because if you actually start looking at Donald Trump's behavior, you know, he's not Reed Hastings, who he pointed a finger at and said maybe the DOJ should be investigating him among other prominent Democrats. Hastings has said, give me everything, put everything out there. The president's not doing that. He's calling people to the Situation Room to say, try to stop this, block this as much as you can. So the politics of this is important because what it's doing is forcing Republicans to take a side. It's amazing that we actually have to talk about sex trafficking in the way that we are in our government at the highest levels of our government, but that's what Trump's behavior has forced us to do and forced Republicans to do. They now have to be very vocal about whether or not they're either going to keep Donald Trump's name out of this in the best way they can or elevate this to a point where we now can create some kind of accountability around whose names are in these files, why they're there, and what we actually do next.
Lisa, let's talk about, there's a lot of stuff to talk about on the legal side. There's lots and lots of stuff, for anywhere from Ghislaine Maxwell's stuff and possibly trying to get a commutation of her sentence to what happens with this bill. There's some chance it gets blocked in the Senate. There's some chance Donald Trump doesn't sign it. But let's say it got through the Senate and Donald Trump signed it. What then is the Department of Justice compelled to do? Has there ever been a case where there's been a bill to say release all the information?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, usually Congress sort of goes to the Department of Justice in the posture of either a request or a subpoena for documents.
Right.
Sometimes they'll fight that out, and sometimes that will even go to court. You'll remember that when Eric Holder was Attorney General, the battle over files relating to the Fast and the Furious investigation was litigated to a point where it only ended after Barack Obama left office, with Congress not achieving most of what they wanted to obtain.
Right.
So to your point, what happens next? I think what happens next is that the Department of Justice will come back to Congress if the bill were passed and enacted and say, we can hand over this, but we can't hand over that. And one of the things they'll say that they can't hand over is anything that's implicated in an ongoing law enforcement investigation. Why do I raise that? Because there may be a not coincidental overlap with Donald Trump's tweets before the weekend, where he is calling on Pam Bondi to initiate this new investigation of several Democrats who appear in the files and the bank JP Morgan.
She's asked the SDNY to do.
Correct, which she says she's asked SDNY to do, and we don't know whether Jay Clayton, who's the interim U.S. attorney there, is in fact going to do it.
Right.
But it gives the Department of Justice an excuse
to say there's a live investigation here.
There's a live investigation here. Now, in the FOIA context, meaning the Federal Freedom of Information Act, that would be, in many cases, a reasonable justification and one that courts would upheld for withholding documents. What happens, though, when Congress passes a bill that is law to compel that? I think we're in uncharted territory here, Ali.
Basil, the term client list, the term Epstein files, these are colloquial terms because, as Lisa says, there's a lot of information in here. It is fascinating that this is playing out. Donald Trump's communication with the FBI and the DOJ are playing out on Donald Trump's social media. I don't know whether this is by design or not. He tells Pam Bondi what to do on social media. She responds. They say the president has ordered this or asked for this. It almost seems like there's some deliberate attempt to have this play out in public as opposed to normal processes.
Yeah, I mean, it's that call and response that Trump is used to doing with his supporters and certainly within the bureaucracy. But yeah, he wants to seem like he's in charge, that he's not withering away. But in addition to it being a very important time because we got to get this information out, it's also a very dangerous time because when Trump feels like his back is against the wall, he lashes out.
Yep.
There's a military buildup in the Caribbean right now, right?
Yep.
And we still need to see how that plays out. And so one of the things that I think Democrats were really good at in this period is saying, do not take your eyes off the ball. That there is a lot in these Epstein papers and these files, and we need to keep pushing. And that's what one side has done. And Trump's response to that has been, well, guess what? I'm going to actually use the bureaucracy in the best way that I can with all of the power and the resources at my disposal to try to push this away. So it's essentially signaling to people that I'm going to retaliate and I'm going to use everything I can to do that. But again, what's worked, and it's worked very well, is that there's so many people saying, don't take your eye off the ball, let's keep pushing.
I'm glad you brought up the military buildup on the Caribbean because I am actually legitimately concerned that we could end up in a war that nobody understands or cares about in Venezuela as a distraction to this. Lisa, can you help me with this conversation that we're going to have a little later on with Congressman Raskin about the communication with Ghislaine Maxwell's people, her situation in this new prison in which it's been alleged that she's getting preferential treatment in an already relatively cozy prison environment?
So what we understand, Ali, is that some whistleblower affiliated with the Federal Bureau of Prisons sent a letter and had communications with the House Judiciary Committee staff and specifically the Democrats on the committee, which led to Congressman Raskin's letter summarizing all of the ways in which this whistleblower said Ghislaine Maxwell is receiving unprecedented, preferential, and possibly unlawful treatment at federal prison Camp Bryan in Texas. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney has since said that several people have been fired on account of their sharing that information with Congressman Raskin. And in particular, that attorney has also said that they violated Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney-client privilege. That is not true. Okay, when a federal prisoner, irrespective of how low security or high security their situation is, communicates with their lawyers over the email system that's available to inmates, they are warned in advance. This is not confidential. We will monitor this. We have a right to maintain it. We have a right to screen it. And they expressly almost check a box saying, I understand that my communications over this email system are not subject to an attorney-client privilege.
Oh, wow.
So to the extent that Ghislaine Maxwell is saying to her attorney from that federal prison camp, you know, let's have conversations about, for example, my commutation application, and the warden is waiting to hear from you, or they'll send my materials to you. That wasn't an attorney-client privilege communication, but it reveals everything that we need to know. Why is the warden involved in helping to prepare a commutation application for Ghislaine Maxwell? All the more irregular about her treatment. But I will say one thing. We know that the Deputy Attorney General who took Ghislaine Maxwell's interview feels as if there was information that he doesn't know, right? That there is some gulf between the materials DOJ had in its possession and what the estate is releasing to the Congressional Committee. And that gulf And we don't know how large that chasm is or not. That is why Donald Trump is behaving the way that he is, because there's some element of this that's totally out of his control, right? If House Oversight has said to the estate, give us everything you have, here are the lists of requests that we have, and they are sort of doing so on a rolling basis, nobody really knows to what extent the Venn diagram looks like this or to what extent it looks like this. And that's why you see Donald Trump behaving particularly erratically right now, with every attempt to either push this off on other people or force your attention to a bouncing ball somewhere else, like Venezuela.
And if I could just say very quickly, this disparate behavior that you mentioned with respect to Maxwell is part of what's fueling the anger right now within the Republican Party, certainly among independents. The fact that Forbes magazine had a poll that said that Americans are tired of billionaires being involved in our politics. And if you consider the fact that the QAnon conspiracy was all about wealthy and powerful shielding themselves with respect to sex trafficking, that all this does is continue to fuel that anger and remind voters that Donald Trump is paying attention to his cronies and not to you. And that's the Marjorie Taylor Greene's point that Democrats have been making.
Marjorie Taylor Greene hasn't actually moved that much. She's still been on that same issue. It looks like Trump's moved on this. Thanks to both of you. Appreciate it. Lisa Rubin, MS Now legal correspondent and host of the podcast. Can they do that? Am I saying that right? Like, I like that. I'm leaning into the asking it as a question. Basil Smikle is an MS Now political analyst and professor and master's program director at Columbia University. All right, coming up, President Trump's budget director and Project 2025 architect Russell Vought. This man is moving forward with his plan to kill the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. In its 14-year history, the CFPB clawed back $21 billion worth of predatory bank fees, canceled debts, and principal reduction for regular American citizens. Richard Cordray, the CFPB's very first director, joins me next to talk about what dismantling this important agency he helped to build means for you. The White House budget director, Russ Vought, the architect of Project 2025, has long been aiming to shut down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. This past week, the Trump administration took its most direct action yet to do just that. In a Monday court filing, the Department of Justice declared the consumer watchdog agency's funding to be illegal, putting it on track to fully deplete its cash reserves by early 2026, which would effectively shut it down. But if we're seeing the end of the CFPB, it's worth going back to the beginning to understand why it exists in the first place. It was established by Congress as an independent bureau within the Federal Reserve System in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, which wiped out trillions of dollars in household wealth and led to millions of job losses and home foreclosures. That recession, which was the worst financial crisis in America since the Great Depression, was fueled in part by predatory lending and risky subprime mortgages. So the CFPB was created to protect you, the consumer, from unfair, deceptive, or abusive practices in financial markets. The Bureau oversees financial institutions and can issue new rules around consumer mortgages, credit cards, student loans, credit reporting, and more. It can penalize banks and lenders and companies for breaking those rules. It also maintains a vast consumer complaint database. Altogether, the CFPB has clawed back more than $21 billion for consumers since it began operations in 2011. It's become one of Wall Street's most feared regulators, and it has always been a prime target for Republicans and their billionaire donors. Last year, Elon Musk posted, quote, "Delete CFPB" on his X social media platform. It's plain to see why Musk and others want to muzzle this consumer watchdog. At the end of the day, the CFPB helps correct the power imbalance between lenders with all their resources and their teams of lawyers and you, the consumer. So joining me now is someone uniquely qualified to speak to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Richard Cordray. He was the first director of the CFPB from 2012 to 2017. He's the author of Watchdog: How Protecting Consumers Can Save Our Families, Our Economy, and Our Democracy. Richard, great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here, Ali.
Richard, I'm going to ask you the same question I've asked you for 14 years, and I asked Elizabeth Warren before you. Explain to me how you can be on the wrong side of the CFPB. I totally get that you can say it can run better and it can do certain things and it needs to be adjusted, but this is a bureau that was literally invented to protect people from the scammy behavior of lenders.
Look, when you're on the other side from the CFPB, it's usually because you're in the tank for financial companies. And when Elon Musk first came in during the transition, he had a conflict of interest. There were issues in front of the CFPB involving his companies. And so he was intent on shutting the Bureau down. They also just are ideologically opposed to protecting consumers. And frankly, Ali, I don't get it, because now in the wake of the recent elections, they're trying desperately to claim the affordability mantle. There is nothing affordable about letting companies cheat consumers, jack up costs for consumers, defraud consumers. All of that makes things more expensive for the average family in America.
Yeah, let's talk about what some of those specific things are. What are the specific things that my viewers would understand that the CFPB has been involved in stopping or protecting them from?
Well, first of all, there's enforcement actions. When companies violate the law in ways that hurt, the CFPB has brought actions, dozens and dozens, hundreds of actions to stop that in court. It's a law enforcement function. If you don't have cops on the beat, you're going to have people take advantage of other people. That's life in America. And the reason the CFPB was created was to level the playing field, as you said, so that people would be protected against that kind of cheating and mistreatment. The consumer complaint function that you mentioned, that's gotten billions of dollars back for people, put it back in their pockets so they can afford, the costs in their daily lives. That has been shut down by the Bureau, and the courts have tried to tell the Bureau that you have to start that up again, and Russell Vought, but he's not really listening, and now he's trying to find new strategies for shutting down the Bureau altogether.
What's the thing most people don't know about the CFPB, but that they've been helped by? Something that happened as a result of either consumer complaints or CFPB's investigation that probably costs me less now on a monthly basis because you fixed something?
Well,